I am in a toxic relationship with a video game. It's called Cyberpunk 2077. And I don't know why I keep coming back to it, but I do. I know that it's not healthy. I know it's not healthy, but I feel like I have no choice. So let's go ahead together as a people and take it out. And welcome to another sensational Sunday. I'm Mike, and I am here to talk about Cyberpunk 2077, what's been going on with it this week. But before we hop into the main story, I want to go ahead and respond to your comments from last week's video about PlayStation possibly doing backwards compatibility and the PS3, PSP, and PS Vita stores all shutting down. And by the way, that has been confirmed since last week that the stores are shutting down for the PS3, PSP, and PlayStation Vita. Sony did officially confirm that. So yep, that is happening. Backwards compatibility, still nothing on that. But the stores are shutting down. In our first comment, Claude2001 said, I switched from PlayStation to Xbox and PC because the compatibilities, playing old games on the newest console is so convenient. Putting 15-plus-year-old games into the newest console and seeing them load is so satisfying. So yes, the one thing I failed to mention is PC is awesome, especially if you have like a large Steam library, because I just have games going back to, I don't know, like he said, 10 or 15 years ago, and I can still play them today. So if you do want to build like an old library of games and not have to worry about it in the future and be able to take advantage of new hardware, PC is kind of the way to go. Even though I just got the PS5, PC is still my primary platform. And then the Switch is like my favorite console still. And like you said, on Xbox, you can just put in the disc and it'll play if it's a game that they've already, done the work to make the emulation work for. So they're still working on it. It's still a work in progress. Xbox is not perfect, but I do think that it is important to have backwards compatibility. And seeing the number of people that watch that video, which is a lot more than my normal, 10 to 20 people that watch my videos on Sunday, I think it's important to a lot of people. The next comment is from THX113THX. And they said, with the head guy in charge of Sony saying he can't understand why anyone would want to play older games, I wouldn't hold my breath for backwards compatibility. That is true. He did say that. I didn't include the actual quote in the video. But yeah, the head of Sony did say that he can't see why people would play older games. But I take that for a grain of salt, because there's been a lot of times where Sony said they're not going to do something and they end up bending on it because of demand. If you remember the crossplay thing, they were like, they're not doing it, it's going to create vulnerabilities in their network, blah blah blah, and they caved on it eventually because people made enough of a fuss about it. If people make enough of a fuss about backwards compatibility, they'll do it, because at the end of the day, in order to keep PlayStation successful, they have to listen to their user base. If you look at the time Microsoft was doing backwards compatibility and they weren't planning on doing it or working on it, so you can easily see that comment could just be to dismiss it because they're not working on it and it's a feature that Microsoft had and they didn't. I don't personally hold when people say stuff like that as to be the end-all be-all, like it's never going to happen because they said that. I'm not saying it's guaranteed to happen. It's possible it still might not happen, but I wouldn't hang my hat on that statement. And the last comment is from GameCore, and they said, who's brave enough to buy a digital-only PS5 now? Which, it was a funny comment, because I just literally bought a PS5 digital. Hold on. Yeah, but in all seriousness, Sony really needs to address these older games. It's important for building the trust of the community to be like, okay, well, we can make digital purchases and be comfortable with them moving forward over to the new platform. Even if you happen to change architecture in the future, which is what happened with PS3 to PS4 and PS2 to PS3, PS4 and PS5 are on the same architecture. That's why there's no issues playing, or barely any issues playing PS4 games on PS5. Like I said, that's why it's important. It's just making sure the community has faith that if they buy something digitally, they're not going to lose their money, especially selling an all-digital system. However, it doesn't matter if you buy the digital system or not, because, like I mentioned in last week's video, with the PS4, if the servers go offline, you can't play disc-based games either, and I bet the PS5 is going to be the same because all games are server-based now, so pretty much. So even if you could like perhaps install it, it's still going to be like not the full experience if the servers are down. I mean, if you want me to be honest about it, I'm pretty sure Xbox is probably the same too. You probably have to be connected to their server in order to play any games. So from the aspect of being able to play your older games once Sony stops supporting it, it doesn't matter if you actually buy the digital system or not, because most likely if their servers go down, the discs aren't going to work anyway, just like with the PS4. The one advantage is if you want to like trade games in, that's really pretty much the only reason to own the disc-based console now, is if you want to trade games in and, you know, save a little bit of money and put it towards a new game. That's pretty much it. So yeah, I picked a few comments. I know there were a lot in last week's video, and I really do appreciate all the feedback you guys left. But with that being said, let's hop into today's story, and it is all about Cyberpunk 2077. So if you haven't heard, that 1.2 patch dropped. So when CD Projekt Red put out their roadmap, they said that there were going to be 2 big patches at the beginning of the year, 1.1 and 1.2, that was going to introduce a bunch of major fixes and kind of get the game back on track and make it playable, and you know, they're going to continue to work on it. So 1.1 came out, 1.2 was supposed to come out in February, but CD Projekt Red got hacked, which ended up causing the update to be pushed back, which is understandable because if you get hacked to that level, you want to make sure your system is fortified before you start working on anything and putting sensitive information back up there. So the patch ended up launching, and it was 33 gigs on PC. It was 33 gigs. I downloaded the whole thing because I was really curious if this was going to fix the game or not. There's one point in the game that I'm at, I mentioned it, you know, in my previous Cyberpunk videos, where basically I'm driving and pretty much 3 phone calls start playing at the same time. The audio and the video is completely different. And then also there's issues with the loading screen where it disappears and there's just smoke there and then it comes back in. Loaded the game up and I saw the same exact issues. After downloading that large 33 gig patch, I will say that the driving was smoother. There was less dips when I was driving around the city. But from the limited time that I spent with it, because I'm not going to keep playing this game if it's still broken, yeah, for me it's still the same. I mean, I could go through and play it. Like, it was never broken to the point where I couldn't play it. It was just broken to the point where it was kind of inconvenient to play. So I really wanted to wait for this to be the fix, but clearly it's not. Clearly it's not the fix. Clearly I'm in an abusive relationship with this game because I keep getting hyped up. Every big patch, I'm like, I'm gonna go see if this is improved, and then it's not. And yes, it's starting to get disappointing. And yes, I'm starting to wonder if I should have just got my money back when I had the chance, because this game might not be playable for a long time, and that's the truth. And part of the reason I'm even mentioning it is because CD Projekt Red did come out with some new information about their future plans as far as working on the game. So apparently they're staffing up and they're changing the way that they do business to better prepare for their future games, like the next Witcher game and possibly Cyberpunk expansions or a future Cyberpunk project. They didn't really say particular what these games were, if they mean that they're going to continue to work on Cyberpunk or not. So basically they're making their engine easier to work with, and they're making more agile and focused teams to be able to work on 2 games at the same time, so they can work on the next Witcher and work on Cyberpunk at the same time, hopefully starting next year from what they were saying. So yeah, that's good. But also when I initially read that, I was like, should you really be talking about the next Witcher game when you just kind of burned everybody with Cyberpunk? I understand that they're restructuring to deal with this problem, but like when I heard they were working on another Witcher and they're gonna be working on 2 games at the same time, I'm like, cool, but I spent $60 on Cyberpunk, so when are we going to get a playable version of that? I feel like that should be the main focus. I feel like they could have made the same statements, though without, you know, the part about they're going to be working on multiple games. They could have talked about restructuring and all that stuff. I don't think there was any reason to say that they were going to be working on multiple games aside from, you know, investors building faith back with their investors. That's pretty much it, because the fan base, if I'm reading that, well, I am a fan of the game. You know, I wanted to play the game, but, you know, it's still broken. Me reading that was just kind of like, okay, but what about the game that I already bought? I don't care about the future projects unless one of those future projects is, you know, fixing the game. But it could also be looked at as if they're confident that they're going to have this game fixed relatively soon, then they're fine with saying that they're working on the next Witcher. But yeah, I don't think that they should have said that. It kind of makes it seem like they might be like moving on from Cyberpunk. I don't think that's what it is, but it kind of felt like that to me. I know that they built a lot of good faith around The Witcher 3 because they spent a lot of time improving that game, but I feel like they lost a lot of good faith with Cyberpunk, so I just think that they should tread a little bit more carefully. The other thing that they mentioned was apparently they're going to be a single player focused studio, because before they mentioned that they were going to do a multiplayer component to Cyberpunk, and that seems to kind of be canceled without saying it's officially canceled, but it's pretty much canceled. And you know what? That's probably for the best, considering that you can pick your genitals in this game, and the game also has issues with them not staying inside of your clothing. So an online experience, you know, with these kind of glitches and situations, it might not be the strongest experience. It might not be what you want. So yes, it's fine. We don't need the multiplayer. It's fine. It's fine. Just fix the single player and the generals. The other big thing that happened with Cyberpunk is the game was in such disarray, especially with the PS4 version on the base PS4, that Sony actually pulled it from their store. So even after this big patch, Sony has still not put it back on the store. There really hasn't been any word from Sony. CD Projekt Red basically said that they see every patch as an opportunity to get them closer to getting back on the PlayStation Store. And that's good, but the game's still broke, y'all. It's still broke. And I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but it really does feel like it's going to be forever before this game is really going to be playable at the level that you want. And I'm definitely not going to blame CD Projekt Red for me buying the game, because I was already aware of all the issues when I bought it, but I was just curious to see how bad it actually was, and I was like, oh yeah, it's pretty bad. So overall, I really hope that CD Projekt Red can take the time to make sure that this game becomes playable as it should be, and not just kind of dump it and move on to the next game, you know, the next Witcher series and another possible Cyberpunk project. I want to see this game through to completion. I don't want to say glitch free, because that's not possible. Some glitches are fine. It's just going to happen. It's a game. But, you know, a point where it's actually playable and enjoyable for most people. And then from there, you can see if the gameplay and the story is enjoyable or not to you, but at least get it playable for the people who gave you the $60 like me. Well, that's going to bring today's video to a conclusion. But if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to tell a friend, tell a coworker, like, share, and subscribe. And always do at least 2 things at the same time. We out.